Zhang Hao still considers himself a man of pride, a pure man. And if anyone asks how things turned out like this, his answer is simple. He was tricked. He clearly remembers walking home after work, only to spot a massive sun looming in the sky, glowing red, orange, and pink like some apocalyptic eclipse. Then, everything went black. Now, he wakes up in a frilly pink night suit, a bunny hairband snug on his head, and teddy bears scattered all around him. His bedroom door bursts open as his dad steps in, casually asking if he's awake yet. Without waiting for a reply, his father reminds him of plans he made with Long to go shopping, then mentions he's heading out to buy groceries with Aunt Chong and the kids. Before leaving, he scolds Zhang Hao for not being more like Long, his best friend who apparently knows how to do makeup and take care of himself, and slams the door shut. Stunned, Zhang Hao just sits on the bed, questioning everything. Who is he? Who's Chong? Is that his dad's name? Who is Long? Why does he need to put on makeup and go shopping? Has he lost his mind? As these questions spiral in his head, the phone on his bedside table rings. He picks it up and hears a peppy voice on the other end. Long, calling himself the bold and brave one with tattooed arms, excited to drink smoothies together. Based on Long's voice, Zhang Hao's mind conjures up an image of a tall, muscular guy with inked arms radiating manly energy. Fired up, he shouts into the phone that he's coming right away. But when he opens the door, the real Long is nothing like his imagination, slim, petite, golden-haired, wearing a choker, and dressed in feminine clothes. With a pout, Long scolds him for making him wait until noon, dramatically asking what would have happened if someone had tried to kidnap him. Zhang Hao opens the door, and his brain nearly short-circuits at the sight in front of him. Ignoring the petite, golden-haired figure standing there, he shouts out, looking around wildly for the real Long, convinced his muscle-bound, tattooed brother must be hiding nearby. But the delicate figure calmly replies that he is Long. Zhang Hao's dad appears behind him, confirming that Long has arrived. Long greets him with a sweet hello, and the dad gushes about how well Long dresses and insists that Zhang Hao should learn from him. Long blushes like a bashful schoolgirl, giggling an "Oh, uncle," while the dad continues reminiscing about how a proper boy should behave, just like he did when he married Zhang Hao's mother. Then, casually, he mentions it's time for their skin treatment. Meanwhile, Zhang Hao stands frozen, overwhelmed by confusion. And then the truth unravels. The world has changed. Gender roles have flipped completely. Men are now the homemakers and nurturers, while women dominate physically, becoming soldiers, workers, and protectors. Men, biologically weaker and with less endurance, are responsible for childcare, while women take on every task that requires strength or grit. The imbalance has even skewed the population, with fewer men and more women, leaving men to be treated like delicate treasures. Outside, Long clings to Zhang Hao's hand, chirping about buying mascara and getting their nails done. Zhang Hao, still shell-shocked, watches as Long complains about one of his sisters using up all the mascara again and mentions picking up another pepper spray because of the rise in thug activity. Zhang Hao's thoughts spiral. This world is flipped, with men acting like women and women acting like men, and he just can't keep calm. But as they pass a tattoo bar, something snaps. Zhang Hao grabs Long's hand, dragging him toward it with fire in his eyes, declaring he'll bring back Long's masculinity. They burst through the door and Zhang Hao boldly demands dragon tattoos for them both. Long panics, screaming that Zhang Hao has lost his mind. But Zhang Hao isn't listening. He insists he's not crazy and today, he's going to make Long remember what it means to be a real man. Inside the tattoo bar, a female artist is working on another girl's ink when she looks up and tells him little brothers can't just get tattoos so easily. Another woman chimes in, teasingly asking if he's not a good boy. But Zhang Hao ignores them all, rips off his shirt, and declares loudly that he'll prove to every sister in the room that he's a man. The women go wide-eyed, then burst into laughter, tossing money at him and egging him on to strip more. Long desperately tries to pull him back, warning him to stop, but Zhang Hao's too fired up. He screams that they're all fools with useless backs and continues pushing forward, yelling that he's going to be a real man. Later, Zhang Hao returns home absolutely drained, his feet aching with every step. He staggers through the door, groaning that he's back and telling someone to destroy it quickly because he's tired. But sitting on the couch is a woman he doesn't recognize. She raises an eyebrow and greets him with a flat, surprised tone, asking if he's really just come back. In a panic, Zhang Hao backtracks out the door, apologizing loudly and claiming he's made a mistake. His thoughts spiral again. How could there be a woman in the house? Isn't this supposed to be his home? That evening at the dinner table, they all sit together as his dad happily cooks and serves the food. He reminds Zhang Hao that he had already mentioned Aunt Yin and Qin would be joining them for dinner. Aunt Yin waves it off, saying it doesn't matter and that Ho-Ho usually has a lot going on. Zhang Hao, still frazzled, apologizes awkwardly. Then he explains that Aunt Yin is his stepmother and Qin is his stepsister, and in a few days, they'll all be moving into a big new house together. Zhang Hao puts down his chopsticks, saying he's full and heading back to his room, politely telling everyone to enjoy the rest of the meal. He collapses onto his bed, arms spread wide, his mind reeling from the chaos of the day. Everything feels exhausting, dressing up, putting on makeup, dodging thugs in the street. He wonders if he's transmigrated into some alternate feminist reality where traditional gender roles have flipped. Long and his father have become complete sissies, and he fears he's next in line. Will he end up as someone's wife? A delicate daughter? He's even heard rumors that in this world, men have menstrual cycles. Turning his head, he glares at a teddy bear sitting nearby, fury rising. In one swift motion, he grabs it and hurls it across the room, yelling that he refuses to become a baby, that he will find a way to fix everything. But the teddy bear flies with perfect aim, smacking straight into the chest of his stepsister, Zhang Qin, who just walked in. Her expression tightens, and before he can react, she strides toward him and suddenly pins him down onto the bed. Caught completely off guard, Zhang Hao blurts out an apology, not expecting the situation to turn so bizarre. But Zhang Qin wraps her arms around him, pressing his face into her chest, softly asking if he missed his sister. His entire face goes beet red as he stammers out a flustered yes. She pulls his face away with a teasing smile and asks why he's so red, wondering if he's running a fever. Zhang Hao lies there, stunned, his heart pounding, unsure of what just happened, and thinks to himself, maybe this world isn't all that bad after all. Later that night, Zhang Hao lies restless in bed, sleep refusing to come. Just as he starts to drift off, a voice gently calls out his name, Zhang Hao. His eyes snap open, one at a time, groggy and confused. Who's calling him in the middle of the night? He turns over and freezes when he sees a girl calmly sitting beside him. He bolts upright on the bed, shouting in shock, demanding to know who she is. The girl smiles calmly, leaning in so close he can feel her breath as she cups his face, asking if he doesn't remember her. And then it hits him. His eyes go wide as he recalls that moment when the sky had turned strange, when the sun looked like an eclipse. It was her. He finally remembers and demands to know who she is and why she brought him into this strange, sassy world. With an ethereal calm, she introduces herself as the goddess of the blood moon. She reminds him that in his world, he always complained about being a virgin, about wanting a change. Isn't this great? A world where so many girls actually like him? But Zhang Hao recoils, yelling that none of them are normal, that this isn't what he wanted at all, and he wants to go back immediately. The goddess replies that he can return, but only if he completes a task. When he asks what the task is, she smirks and reminds him of how he always claimed to be a real man. In this world, the sissies only see surface-level beauty and lack any real strength or conviction. A true man should be able to push through, to fight for his identity. It's not just about strength, it's about effort, about proving he's more than a label. Even opening a water bottle cap with bare hands matters here. She tells him he must become a real man in a world ruled by women, and maybe then, a path home will appear. If not, he'll have no choice but to adapt, to fit in. Zhang Hao stares at her, horrified, yelling that fitting in means becoming a sissy, and that's the last thing he ever wanted. She smirks and says that if he insists, then maybe he's right, and she hopes he enjoys his time in this world. With that parting comment, she vanishes in a soft glow of light. Zhang Hao shouts after her, demanding to know what it actually means to become a real man, but no answer comes. The silence of the night deepens, and eventually, he falls asleep. By morning, he wakes groggily, thinking it was all just a weird dream, until his eyes land on a pink strip of a bodice lying next to him. He freezes, then sighs, realizing that it wasn't a dream after all. This mission of becoming a real man in a feminist world is very real, and the worst part is, he has absolutely no idea where to begin. He knocks his head in frustration and stares at his own reflection in the mirror, reluctantly admitting that, at this point, he's already become a bit of a sissy. Whatever this mission is, it's clear he needs to understand this world better before doing anything. Later in his room, he gathers stacks of newspapers and spreads them out, combing through article after article. With each headline, his confusion deepens. These can't be real stories, but apparently, they are, and they're not even the most scandalous ones. In this bizarre world, women are the dominant force, taking the lead in everything. Men, by contrast, are seen as passive and delicate. There's even a biological phenomenon that identifies men, a kind of immobility or physical numbness during their first time that can't be faked. Zhang Hao finds it ridiculous, even disturbing, but with no other path back to his world, he figures he has to start somewhere. Setting aside thoughts of the mysterious goddess of the blood moon, he focuses on the eclipse-like sky from that night. Maybe it was just a magnetic anomaly, something scientific, something explainable. He tells himself not to rely on a vague, mystical task alone. If he can't solve it himself, he'll pay someone who can. But then reality hits. He's just a broke high school student with no money. First things first, he needs a way to earn cash. Determined, he flings open the door, only to be hit with another shock. Standing right outside is his stepsister, Qin, wearing the most scandalous outfit he's ever seen. She flashes a wink and teases him, asking if he came to taste sister's breakfast. He stands frozen, jaw slack, stammering out her name in awe. And as his eyes linger a moment too long, he thinks to himself, if all the girls in this world are like Qin, maybe, just maybe, he can survive this madness a little longer. Standing in front of the mirror, Zhang Hao adjusts the tie of his three-piece school uniform and sighs, quietly admitting that, despite everything, his face is undeniably pretty, if only it wasn't leaning so much toward the feminine side. Today marks his first day attending school since arriving in this strange new world. He steps out of his room and heads toward the kitchen, where his father and stepmother are preparing food, while his stepsister Qin sits at the table enjoying her breakfast. She casually invites him to eat, but his eyes go wide when he catches his stepmother smacking his dad playfully on the bum. Horrified, he thinks to himself that Auntie is straight up eating his dad's tofu. Trying to erase the image from his mind, he quickly announces that he's heading to school because Long is waiting, and his father calls after him to at least take a loaf of bread. Out on the street, Zhang Hao walks beside Long, who excitedly shows off his new lipstick, pouting his lips like he's on a runway. It's apparently this year's latest trend. Zhang Hao, visibly annoyed, pushes him back and scolds him to have a bit of decency. Long frowns, confused, asking what's gotten into him since this kind of thing never used to bother him. Zhang Hao rests a hand on Long's shoulder, telling him that things are different now. He wants to become a real man. Long stares at him like he's lost it, shouting that wanting to be a real man doesn't even sound right. He warns that if Zhang Hao keeps thinking like that, he'll never get married. Zhang Hao's irritation flares, but before he can respond, Long panics and urges him to move, whispering that perverts are watching them. Zhang Hao blinks in confusion, asking where, and Long points toward a pillar. Peeking from behind it is a girl who boldly says that Zhang Hao is really cute. Zhang Hao shrugs it off, asking what the big deal is. Surely two grown men shouldn't be afraid of something like this. But Long throws a fit, insisting Zhang Hao doesn't get it and babbling that someone who can't even hold a break shouldn't talk so big. Zhang Hao protests, shouting that he used to be a solid fighter, but Long grabs his arm, dragging him away and yelling for him to stop dreaming and just take a different route. As Long pulls Zhang Hao into another street, a girl behind them calls out, "Brothers," but Long doesn't stop or even look back. He dashes ahead so fast that Zhang Hao ends up losing a shoe mid-sprint. They finally come to a stop in a public area, both gasping for air. Long groans that he's sweating and complains that his makeup is about to get ruined. Zhang Hao, bent over and struggling to breathe, wonders how Long can still run like that while he himself started wheezing after just 2 steps. Looking up, he sees the sign for Eleceed Business School and takes in the polished, elite surroundings. It becomes even clearer now, this world truly runs on reversed roles. Girls do all the physical labor, and apparently, his family is well off if he's attending a place like this. He heads to Class 3A and sees a boy handing a water bottle to a girl, saying he can't open it. The girl, Wang, casually takes it and says it's no big deal. Watching this, Zhang Hao thinks to himself how far things have shifted. Men are so weak here that they can't even manage a bottle cap. Determined to prove himself, he walks over, takes the bottle from Wang, and says he'll handle it. How hard could it be? But as he grips the cap and twists, it won't budge. He adjusts his grip, blames the posture, and keeps trying, but it stays firmly shut. Heat rises to his face as everyone in the class watches. Desperate, he yells at the bottle to just do it, but nothing happens. Completely embarrassed, he hands it back to Wang with a tight smile, says excuse me, and walks away. He mumbles to himself that he really couldn't open it. Soon, girls start gathering around his seat, playfully teasing him and offering to open bottles just for him. One giggles that she even has a hair tie and another tells her not to steal him. Flustered, Zhang Hao waves them off, insisting there's nothing wrong, that Wang is only acting off because he hasn't been feeling well lately. But deep down, he's humiliated. Slamming his head onto the desk, he groans and thinks to himself that he has to get stronger, he has to get in shape. If he's going to complete his mission of becoming a real man in this world, he seriously has to level up. After class, Zhang Hao walks alone down the corridor when Long calls out from behind, asking him to wait and suggesting they go to the bathroom together. But Zhang Hao doesn't slow down. Annoyed, he mutters to himself that he doesn't need company for everything, he can go by himself. As he strides ahead, a group of girls passing by start whispering and gawking. They fawn over his soft, pale skin, his delicate wrists, long legs, and perky backside. Zhang Hao hears every word and winces internally, thinking he won't be able to complete his mission if things keep going like this. He may be cute, but he's too physically weak. Something has to change. Determined, he pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through options, looking for a gym or any sort of place to train. As he browses, he mutters to himself that building muscle isn't enough, his mind also needs to toughen up. Then he pauses, considering whether he should message the gym directly and explain his concerns. Just as he's deep in thought, a voice interrupts him. A girl bends down next to him and asks what he's doing. Startled, Zhang Hao turns and sees that it's Huang Yuan, the girl who sits next to him in class. His eyes widen in shock and he shouts, asking why she's approaching people like that out of nowhere. She casually replies that he was so focused, he didn't even notice her coming. Then she leans in closer, so close he can feel her breath, and teasingly asks if he's texting the girl he likes. Zhang Hao's eyes widen as he quickly pushes Huang Yuan aside, telling her to back off and asking what she's even talking about. But she simply grabs his hand and comments on how soft and silky white his skin is. His mind screams in disbelief. Are women in this world always this bold, just grabbing a man's hand like it's nothing? He jerks his hand free and scolds her to have some shame. She narrows her eyes slightly and says he seems different lately, that he wasn't like this before. Zhang Hao brushes it off and insists she's overthinking it, that he's always been like this. A tense silence follows until she breaks it again, asking if he didn't sleep well the night before and offering to show him a great massage technique. He flinches, pushing her back once more, firmly saying that won't be necessary. Internally, he curses, why are women in this world so damn strong? Regaining his composure, he reminds her that class isn't over yet and tells her to go sit down. She agrees with a light smile, just as their English teacher, Ms. Ma, enters the room and tells everyone to take their seats. Zhang Hao opens his book, still rattled, and is hit with another surprise. He can actually understand everything. It's been ages since he last attended school, and English used to be his worst subject. But now, the material feels almost easy. Finally, a perk to this insane world, he's smart now. Glancing toward Ms. Ma with newfound confidence, he silently begs her to call on him so he can show off. She says his name, Zhang Hao, and his heart leaps, this is it. But instead of a question, she tilts her head and asks if he's feeling okay, saying his face looks pale and if he needs to go to the infirmary. Everyone turns to stare. Internally, Zhang Hao snaps, thinking she's the one who looks like death. Out loud, he calmly says he's not sick and that she's mistaken. The girls around him start whispering, wondering what's wrong with their class cutie, noting how odd he's been acting. One of them mentions he's behaving like an idiot, while another speculates that it might be because he fell the other day. Zhang Hao grits his teeth, fuming inside, thinking they're the real idiots, and all he wants now is to go home and escape this chaos. Zhang Hao and Long walk down the street, and Zhang Hao, clearly exhausted, mutters Long's name. Long glances at him and asks what's wrong, noticing how tired he looks. Zhang Hao brushes it off, saying he's fine and just doesn't feel like sleeping. But deep down, he's completely drained, mentally and emotionally wiped out. Ever since he got to school, it's been nothing but chaos. Earlier, a girl playing basketball in an outrageously bold outfit had caught him off guard, asking if she looked good while striking a pose. Then, while walking through the corridor, another girl had the audacity to squeeze his butt and casually comment on how nice it was. And when he tried to push past someone on the stairs, the girl dramatically fell down and accused him of shoving her even though she was the one blocking the way. Thinking back on it now, Zhang Hao is fuming. School is nothing short of a battlefield, and all he wants is to go home and disappear from the madness. As they continue walking through the street, a girl suddenly stops them and calls out to Zhang Hao. He turns, and she nervously says she has something to confess. Without hesitation, she blurts out that she's liked him for a while and asks him to go out with her. Zhang Hao stares at her, overwhelmed, thinking this isn't how confessions are supposed to go, at least not from girls. Politely but firmly, he rejects her, saying he's not planning to date anyone right now. As he turns away, Long pouts dramatically and says he's jealous, pointing out that even the school bullies have a crush on him. Zhang Hao groans, tells Long to shut up, and drags him toward the cafeteria. Once inside, he scans the tables and wonders what he should eat. But then he notices the food on the other students' plates and stares in disbelief. Turning to Long, he asks why everyone eats so little, completely stunned by the tiny portions. Long frowns and says he doesn't understand why Zhang Hao keeps calling him brother all the time, pointing out how weird he's been acting lately. Then, confused, he asks what Zhang Hao even means by that they've always eaten like this. Walking ahead to the counter, Long cheerfully calls out to the cafeteria lady and says he wants a salad and some cucumber, no rice. Zhang Hao watches in disbelief and says that can't possibly be enough food. He's going to pass out at this rate. But Long shrugs and insists he's dieting, totally unbothered. Zhang Hao shakes his head, wondering why men in this world eat like birds. Determined, he walks up to the cafeteria auntie and boldly asks for a big portion of pork with lots of rice. Long gasps and shouts that eating like that will make him gain weight, but Zhang Hao replies firmly that men need proper food if they want to grow strong. Almost instantly, whispers ripple through the cafeteria. One boy says, "Oh my god, look at Zhang Hao, he's really going to eat all that?" Another murmurs that if they had a body like his, maybe they could eat more too. Others scoff that greasy pork will just make him fat, and that it doesn't even look tasty. One even snarks that Zhang Hao must think he can do whatever he wants just because he's popular. But Zhang Hao ignores them all, wolfing down the food with determination. Long leans closer and begs him to stop, saying it's bad manners and people are going to laugh at him. Still, Zhang Hao keeps eating like a man on a mission. Then, a boy approaches their table, Lu Feng, a third-year student from Class 5. With a smirk, he says it's rare to see Zhang Hao eating like this and asks why he's going so hard today, joking that only construction workers eat that way. Zhang Hao glares at him and asks who the hell he even is. Lu Feng laughs and tells him not to mess around. They were in the same class. He then criticizes Zhang Hao's appearance, saying they may be popular, but they still have to take care of themselves, and right now, Zhang Hao just looks greasy. Without missing a beat, Zhang Hao retorts that if Lu Feng's eyes are working properly, maybe it's time to get them checked. Zhang Hao scowls, thinking what the hell is wrong with this guy? Why is he being so annoyingly dramatic? Without holding back, Zhang Hao fires back and asks why Lu Feng is looking down on construction workers, pointing out that if it weren't for their labor, people like him wouldn't be living so comfortably. The moment those words hit, Lu Feng's expression shifts, and he suddenly bursts into tears, wailing that he was only looking out for Zhang Hao and didn't expect to be treated so harshly. A group of girls nearby gathers around, whispering in concern. One of them says, "Isn't that Lu Feng? Why is he crying like that?" Another frowns and mutters that maybe Zhang Hao said something mean to him, adding she didn't expect someone like him to be that kind of person. Meanwhile, inside, Lu Feng is silently grinning to himself, delighted that everyone seems to be siding with him. But before the mood turns completely against Zhang Hao, one bold girl steps forward and speaks up, saying clearly that people should be allowed to eat whatever they want and that it's unfair to judge someone based on their appetite. It's just prejudice, plain and simple. She walks up to Zhang Hao, offers him her lunch, and says warmly that if he's still hungry, he can have some of her meal too. Zhang Hao looks up at her, pleasantly surprised, and thinks to himself, "Nice, another beauty has just entered the stage." As Lu Feng storms off in frustration, Zhang Hao stays seated, still chewing his food, thinking if anyone has something to say, they should master their own business first. But then he casually calls himself the master, which instantly makes Long snap, shouting that calling himself that is way too arrogant and doesn't match his manly image at all. Across the table, Zhaoying smirks and teases that he sounds even more charming when he talks like that. Lu Feng turns his head away, irritated, and mutters to his group that they should leave, saying this place sucks. One of his companions tries to console him, saying Zhaoying must have been tricked by Zhang Hao's looks and that Feng's personality is way better. Lu Feng sighs and says he just hopes she realizes what kind of guy Zhang Hao really is. Back at the table, Zhaoying smiles softly and tells Zhang Hao to eat slowly so he doesn't choke, suggesting he sip some soup first. Zhang Hao blinks, confused, and whispers to Long, asking who she is. Long answers casually that she's Zhaoying, the senior and captain of the college basketball team. She even sits next to him in class. Zhang Hao thinks to himself that apparently he's pretty good at attracting women without even trying. Zhaoying changes the subject and asks if he's tried the Heroes X League game she gave to Long last time. Long admits it's hard to play and definitely not child's play. Zhang Hao raises a brow and repeats the name, Heroes X League, the 5v5 tower demolition game. Long nods and says yes, then reminds him he once claimed he wasn't interested in these girls' games. Zhang Hao, caught off guard, thinks to himself that he never expected to find MOBA-style games in this bizarre world, but apparently they're really popular, especially among the girls. Yang smiles and says that even if there aren't many male players in the Heroes X League, Zhang Hao should still give it a try. Hao, already finishing up his food, adds that he's tested it and thinks it's a fine game. He stands up with his tray and says he's heading back to class. Long waves at Yang and thanks her for the meal, saying they're leaving. As they walk away, Yang sits alone, watching Zhang Hao go, silently wondering when he'll finally accept her feelings. Back in class, Long is absorbed in his phone while Zhang Hao's thoughts spiral. He recalls how Zhaoying mentioned that Heroes X League doesn't have any top-ranked male players, which means stars like Dasher and Uzi probably aren't competing at the Marvelous League level. They must be playing somewhere else in the world. He decides he'll make time to watch them live. His thoughts drift again and he murmurs aloud, wondering what it really means to be a real man in this upside-down world. Long looks up from his phone, confused, asking what he's mumbling about. That's when Zhang Hao notices a girl sitting quietly by the window, isolated and absorbed in her own space. Her name is MANHUA, a recent transfer student. Zhang Hao leans over and nudges Long, asking if he's interested in her. Caught off guard, Long ducks behind his phone and mutters that she doesn't really like to talk, but yeah, he thinks she's pretty cute. Zhang Hao instantly stands up and says they should go talk to her and show some courage. Long panics and protests, saying a man should be more reserved and gentle. But Zhang Hao is already pulling him along, insisting that letting a new transfer student sit alone goes against basic decency, conscience, and man code. Zhang Hao walks confidently over to Min and greets her with a casual introduction, saying he's her classmate, Zhang Hao. He sizes her up inwardly, thinking how every other girl in this world seems drawn to him, but this one looks seriously aloof. Trying to break the ice, he gestures to Long beside him, saying this is Lily. Long gives a soft hello, and Min responds with one just as quiet. Long leans in and murmurs that they should go. Clearly, she doesn't want to talk. But Zhang Hao isn't backing down. He notices the book in her hand and asks if she's reading something in English. She doesn't respond, so he gently asks if she just doesn't want to talk to them. She replies calmly that it's not that, she just doesn't know what to say. Zhang Hao immediately thinks she must be shy and decides she probably wants to talk to someone but doesn't know how. Offering a warm smile, he stretches out his hand and says they could be friends. Min takes his hand and shakes it, and he silently reminds himself that real men don't turn a blind eye when a girl feels like she has to face everything alone. Just then, a girl Yuan approaches and blurts out, asking why Mr. Zhang is hanging out with the transfer student. Zhang Hao grins and thinks the first friend Min needs should be someone talkative. Without hesitation, he gently pushes Yuan toward Min and says this is her chance to put those social skills to use and become her friend. Yuan looks confused and blurts out what, but Zhang Hao winks at her with encouragement, and she quickly gets the hint and says of course she'll be her friend. Zhang Hao tells them to start chatting while he takes a nap, and as he turns to leave, Yuan calls out to thank him. Over his shoulder, he casually says it's no big deal, but in his head, he's already calculating how to justify the fact that he's only about 50% through this whole real man mission. In his room, Zhang Hao lounges with his headphones on, nodding along to the heavy beats of rock and roll, thinking proudly to himself that real men should absolutely listen to this kind of music. Lost in the rhythm, he even hums a little, fully vibing with the energy when suddenly there's a knock at the door. Before he can respond, his stepsister Chin peeks in and casually asks what he's doing. Without thinking, he waves her in, calling out that he's just listening to music. Chin steps inside, as usual dressed in something more than a little questionable, and looks him over with curious eyes, asking what's going on with him lately. His face flushes red, and internally he wonders if this is one of the perks of having a goddess-tier sister, though he knows that thought alone is dangerous. Out loud, he insists that nothing's wrong, but then she approaches and runs her hand gently through his hair before removing one of his earbuds and placing it in her own ear. With a playful smile, she says he's different from the other boys, bold, attractive, and into rock music. Her hand slides to his chin, and she brushes her thumb lightly across his lips. His brain short-circuits. Is this the test the goddess meant? Is resisting temptation part of becoming a real man? He starts having an internal meltdown, an angel and a devil version of himself yelling at each other in his head. The devil wins. He grabs Chin gently by the shoulders and suddenly pins her beneath him on the bed, leaning over her, whispering her name. His body trembles with tension, sweat dotting his forehead, but just as he raises his hand, an image flashes in his mind. A mysterious girl clutching him tightly and declaring that he belongs to her. That sudden vision snaps him out of it. Gasping, he pulls away from Chin in a panic, barely holding on to his sanity, realizing just how close he came to losing control. Later that night, Chin gently asks Zhang Hao if he's okay. His face is pale, and her hand on his shoulder brings him back from the flash of that strange image in his head. He brushes it off, telling her to rest and not worry. But in his heart, he's shaken. He could barely resist the temptation. She hugs him tenderly, telling him to take care of himself. He nods, thinking how kind she is. When he mentions wanting to cut his hair, she smiles and says she'll love him no matter what. Though something about being around his goddess-like sister feels confusing, he brushes the thought away and promises himself to start fresh. The next morning, Zhang Hao walks into a trendy-looking hair salon. A cheerful stylist greets him, offering to enhance his beauty. He waves it off with quiet confidence. Then a bold woman in a floral shirt walks over, calls him handsome, and seats him in a chair, wrapping a towel around him. When he asks for a beautiful and comfortable hairstyle, she finds the request odd but assumes he really wants something flashy. With a mischievous smirk, she gets to work, assuring him not to worry. Once she's done, she spins him around and proudly asks what he thinks. He looks in the mirror, maybe not perfect, but still pretty damn handsome, and replies, "It's fine." When he offers to pay, she says no, just be a model for her ad. Embarrassed, he declines, but she hands him a business card anyway, calling him handsome boy and inviting him to come back anytime. Zhang Hao smirks, thinking, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep attracting women? Back at home, he stands in front of the mirror admiring the new cut. It's not the best he's had, but it's a fresh start. With this, I'll be a new man in this world, he says to himself, determined. Then he swings open his wardrobe and his smile drops. It's packed with feminine clothing, lace-trimmed blouses, pastel skirts, frilly cardigans. His eye twitches. What is this? He grits his teeth. I'm getting rid of all this. No more skirts. No more cute boy style. I'm going full real man from now on. Zhang Hao rushed downstairs as his dad called for help carrying boxes, but the moment his father saw his new haircut, his eyes went wide with shock. Hao asked how many boxes needed moving, but instead of answering, his father exploded in rage, demanding to know what happened to his hair, shouting that men weren't supposed to cut their hair that short, and swearing to leave a bad review for the hairdresser. Hao tried to explain that his hair was simply too long, but his dad was livid, pulling off his slipper and yelling about marriage prospects and disrespect. Hao shielded himself, shouting that it counted as domestic violence and to avoid hitting the face. Just then, Chin entered and instantly wrapped Hao in a smothering hug, pressing his face into her chest, asking if everything was all right. Smiling sweetly, she told their father to calm down for the sake of his health. Their dad barked that she shouldn't defend Hao and that his stress was justified, especially since Hao didn't even ask for permission before cutting his hair. Still fuming, he stormed off to prepare dinner. Finally spared from further slipper attacks, Hao slumped in relief and thanked Chin for stepping in and saving him. Chin smiled and said she was only looking out for him because she was his sister and cared about his well-being. Then, with a sweet tone, She told Hao to come to her room because she had something to show him. Hao's mind started racing. Was this really the moment he was stepping into the goddess sister's sanctuary? As he entered her room, still flustered by his own thoughts, she walked over to her study table, picked up a small box, and handed it to him, saying she hadn't had time to prepare a gift for him when she moved in, but now she wanted him to have it. She opened the box to reveal a pair of stud earrings. Hao's eyes widened, saying they must have been expensive, but she simply smiled and said she'd buy anything that made him happy. Hao was overwhelmed. Why did he feel so dominated by her presence? Later that night, sitting in his own room, he stared at the earrings, wondering how much they cost. They didn't look fake, and even if they weren't real diamonds, he knew they weren't cheap. He thought he should buy something for her too, but after splurging on the haircut, he was broke. Just then, Long messaged him, excitedly sharing a link to a new novel he'd published. Hao clicked it and read the synopsis, a story about a handsome boy and his bold sister in a forbidden romance where they run away together. Hao scoffed but also smirked, thinking he should write a novel too. First, he'd finish the sequel to the gunslinger's manuscript to earn some quick cash. He began brainstorming, thinking of titles like The Male Tyrant and The Military Queen, or something set in a female-led city. He finally settled on a title he liked, A Real Woman in the World of Man. The next day at school, Zhang Hao was listening to music when a notification popped up on his phone. Curious, he checked it and saw that his novel The Rare Woman in the World of Men had officially passed the signature request. That alone felt like a victory worth celebrating, though with his broke budget, all he could afford was a $1 popsicle. As he walked toward the kiosk, something about it felt oddly familiar. Then it hit him. This was the same shop where he'd first met Ami. Back then, Ami was in her last year of school, petite but unusually strong, the daughter of Uncle Kim who owned the kiosk right next to his old house. He remembered clearly thinking that was what love at first sight must have felt like. He used to stop by after school just to see her, mustering the courage over time until one day he finally confessed his feelings. But she rejected him. That rejection fueled his obsession with becoming a stronger man, someone who could protect Ami-chan. But now, in this upside-down world, things were different. He wasn't the weak one anymore. He was considered attractive, desirable. This time, he was determined to succeed. Confident, he walked into the shop, only to catch a passing conversation about wanting to earn enough money to get married without actually working. Ami's voice rang out from inside the kiosk, complaining loudly that her father was being too noisy. She insisted she didn't need a job because she already did enough physical labor every day. Her dad fired back, saying that the daughter of the Lee family was older and already earning $300,000 a month, ready to marry her husband. Ami countered casually, saying she was making $3,000,000 and would try harder. Zhang Hao, standing just outside, heard the whole argument and thought maybe he should avoid walking in. But then Ami peeked out through the door. His heart skipped a beat. It's her. My first love hasn't changed a bit, he thought with a hopeful smile. He raised his hand and waved, calling out to her. But the second she stepped out fully, his face froze. His eyes widened in sheer horror. Ami was absolutely jacked, her body stacked with muscle like she'd been training for a bodybuilding championship. His brain short-circuited. What the hell? How did she get so buff? He panicked. Ami gave him a warm smile and said he looked handsome with his new haircut. Stunned, he stumbled back and dropped to the ground, shouting, "Don't come any closer." Ami grinned, reminding him that he once said he wanted to see her. Completely overwhelmed, Zhang Hao screamed in his head, "Dear God, please give me my sister back." Ami brought over a watermelon and placed it in front of Zhang Hao with a bright smile, saying it had been a long time since he last visited and asking if he'd like a drink or something to eat. She told him not to be shy and to let her know whatever he wanted. Zhang Hao sat stiffly in the chair, completely overwhelmed by her towering, muscular build. Trying to stay composed, he replied politely that it wasn't necessary. But Ami leaned in and playfully shook his shoulder, saying he was being too formal with her. Unfortunately, her strength backfired. The shake was so forceful that it knocked him clean off the chair. He hit the floor, but before she could help, he leapt to his feet and performed an impromptu gymnastic move to show he was perfectly fine. Flustered, he quickly said he had errands to run and turned to leave, calling her Sister Ami as he dashed off. She called out, asking for his number, but he didn't look back, sprinting away like he was in a marathon. On his way home, Zhang Hao's thoughts were spiraling. In this world, there seemed to be an iron law. No matter how delicate or gentle a girl once was, even someone like Sister Ami had turned into King Kong. He sighed, thinking he really needed to sign up for that Thai boxing class soon. Then remembered he also had to buy a gift for Sister Chin and clean up the girly mess in his closet. Shaking his head, he muttered to himself that he had too much to do and no money to do any of it. As Zhang Hao stepped into the house, muttering to himself that money could solve all his problems, a voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned and saw his stepsister Chin casually doing a headstand in the middle of the living room. Surprised, he greeted her and blinked at the sight, still not used to the reversed norms of this world. When she stood upright and walked over, she mentioned she was trying yoga now since the gym had become boring. How awkwardly thought to himself how strange it was that yoga, usually associated with women in his previous world, was considered a men's workout here. Chin took his hand and said he should try exercising too, especially since his thin build might make him an easy target. Feeling challenged by her words, Hao quickly suggested they arm wrestle to prove he wasn't as weak as she assumed. Chin grinned and accepted, suggesting the loser owe the winner a favor. They both sat down at the table, elbows planted, hands locked. Hao focused, telling himself this was more than just a friendly match. It was about his pride as a man. But as soon as the match began, he realized Chin was much stronger than she looked. His hands started to tremble, his whole arm burning from the pressure. Still, he refused to give in, mentally rallying himself to push through. Chin complimented him for holding on longer than she expected, but eventually, with one swift move, she brought his hand down and won the match. Hao slumped back in his chair, trying to hide his embarrassment, while Chin cheerfully told him he did great. Though exhausted, he managed a small smile, silently promising himself he would train harder. Even in a world turned upside down, he wouldn't give up on being a real man. Zhang Hao rubbed his sore arm and gave his sister a sheepish smile, saying he was fine, though he was clearly still recovering from their intense arm wrestling match. Chin, grinning at her victory, rested her hand on his and said she wanted to try something silly, using someone's thighs as a pillow, just to see what it felt like. Hao's face went pale in surprise. Inside, he panicked, thinking, thighs as a pillow? Who even comes up with that? But trying to play it cool, he said it was no problem. Before he could second-guess himself, Chin had already plopped down, resting her head on his legs like it was the most normal thing in the world. Smooth, just like I thought, she mumbled, clearly content. Hao stared off into space, stiff as a board, thinking, comfortable, you say? Is this normal? When she asked if she could stay like that a little longer, he nodded awkwardly, saying of course. Deep down, he was just trying to keep it together, silently reminding himself that a man always keeps his word, even if the situation is totally beyond his understanding. On the weekend, Zhang Hao was hammering away at his web novel like a man possessed, fingers flying across the keyboard. Just as he was getting into the zone, his phone buzzed. Who calls on a weekend? He grumbled, checking the screen. It was a message from Yao Yanyan, saying she'd invited Yao Hui to the amusement park and thought it'd be great if he tagged along too. Plus, she'd already sent Long to pick him up. Hao sighed. This isn't an invitation, it's a summons. Right on cue, Long's voice echoed from outside, yelling for him to hurry up and open the door. Hao trudged over to his window, peeked out, and there was Long standing below, waving like this was a field trip. Hao muttered, "What sin did I commit to deserve this?" and shouted back, "I'm coming." By the time he made it downstairs, Long blinked and asked how he got ready so fast. Before Hao could answer, a tiny girl suddenly ran up and wrapped her arms around him, shouting, "Little brother Hao." Startled, he turned to Long and asked, "Who is this?" The little girl pouted, asking if he'd forgotten her already. Long explained that this was Li Lin, his real little sister, 6 years old now, and that she had apparently met Hao when she was 4. Hao, stunned, thought to himself, what in the alternate timeline is this? Long didn't even have a sister in my past life. Zhang Hao sighed and said, "Let's go to my room first." As he walked ahead, he suddenly felt a light pinch on his backside and froze. Was that real, or is my imagination acting up again? In his room, he flopped onto the bed, groaning that going to an amusement park sounded boring and he didn't really feel like it. Long, ever the voice of reason, replied that it wouldn't be boring at all, and besides, they were helping their new friends relax. He added that even if Hao was busy, a break now and then wouldn't hurt. Meanwhile, little Li Lin was excitedly circling the room, fawning over Hao's school uniform and admiring his photos like a fan at a pop idol's meet and greet. Sitting up, Hao finally agreed, saying they could go to the haunted house at least, but he needed to change first. I promised that girl I'd help her, and a real man doesn't break his word, he thought, thinking of Min. He changed into a simple, neat outfit, a plain shirt paired with a black jacket that added just the right touch of cool. Long reminded him not to take too long, adding with a smirk that while it's okay for women to wait for men, he didn't want Yuan and the others to be kept waiting. Hao waved it off with a confident, "Don't worry." At the amusement park, Yuan and Min were already waiting, glancing around as the boys finally arrived. Long pointed toward the crowd ahead, saying the girls were right over there. Zhang Hao followed his gesture and spotted them, nodding as Yuan waved them over enthusiastically, calling out to get their attention. As they approached, Yuan's eyes shifted to the child beside Hao and asked whose kid that was. Li Ling instantly clung to Hao's hand and claimed she was from his house, but Long quickly stepped in, lightly smacking her shoulder and explaining she was his sister Lin, who insisted on coming after hearing about the new haunted house. He added that he'd keep an eye on her. Yuan's focus moved back to Hao as she commented that she had never seen him dressed like this before, and with the new haircut, he looked so much better. She nudged Min and asked if she thought the same, but Min stayed quiet. Hao brushed off the compliment casually, saying it wasn't necessary, though Min finally spoke up and told him he looked good today. Hao looked at her kindly, patted her head, and encouraged her to speak more because her voice sounded nice. Yuan, ever the energetic one, clapped her hands and said they should get going to the haunted house. At the entrance of the haunted house, the five of them stood staring at the eerie structure that looked genuinely terrifying. Long immediately latched onto Zhang Hao's arm, wrapping himself tightly around it and whispering that he was a little scared, suggesting they ditch the haunted house for something softer, like the carousel. Hao stared at him in disbelief, wondering what carousel he was talking about. It was just a haunted house, nothing to be scared of, or so he told himself. Long, however, clearly didn't feel the same. His body shivered, and he cried out that he was getting goosebumps. Li Lin piped up, mocking her brother by saying he didn't have much courage. Yuan, ever the organizer, proposed that they split into two groups since there were too many of them. She said she'd pair with Hao while the rest formed the second group, joking that men should protect the boys because, as females, it was their duty. Lin eagerly agreed with the logic, but immediately threw a tantrum when she heard she wouldn't be with Hao, protesting loudly that she refused to be separated from him. Hao calmed her down, telling her to behave and just go with Long, assuring her that he would be fine with Min deep inside. He thought that Yuan and Lin would likely torment him the whole time, while Min seemed like the more peaceful choice. Yuan's expression noticeably dimmed when he said that, her face tinged with disappointment. Hao then decided they'd go in later and told the others to scout ahead, teasing whether they were afraid. Yuan, trying to save face, held Long and Lin close and declared that women couldn't be afraid and that she would protect both Long and his sister. With that, the first group entered the haunted house, leaving Hao and Min behind. 10 minutes after the others went in, Zhang Hao looked at Min and confidently told her not to worry, calling her Moonflower and saying he would protect her. She quietly nodded, and together they stepped into the dim, eerie interior of the haunted house. Almost immediately, they heard distant echoes of Yuan and Long screaming for help, their panicked voices bouncing off the walls, cries of "Help! Please! Shit!" followed by confused yells about which way to go. Hao smirked to himself, thinking Yuan wasn't as brave as she acted. He turned to Min and asked if she was scared, but she said nothing. Gently, he added that it was okay to be afraid and offered a hug. She didn't accept it, but instead reached out and lightly pinched the corner of his jacket, sticking close to him as they walked deeper in. From behind a pillar, a skeleton hand shot out toward them, but Hao casually slapped it away with a muttered warning. A ghost popped out with a loud boo, but Hao simply brushed past, saying he was in a hurry. As they continued navigating the twisting corridors, he noted how big the haunted house was. 10 more minutes passed, and something felt off. He suddenly realized the grip on his jacket was gone. Spinning around, he saw no one behind him. Panic surged through him as he called out her name, Min, again and again, his voice growing louder. He searched frantically, even looking inside a fake skeleton. Then a faint sound drew his attention to a large cupboard. Holding his breath, he stepped closer and asked softly, "Min, are you there?" The voice from the cupboard softly replied, "I'm here." Zhang Hao moved closer, asking gently why she was hiding inside. As he opened the creaky door, he found Min curled up inside, hugging her knees and trembling. She explained in a small voice that she had gotten lost while walking. Hao knelt beside her and extended his hand, reassuring her that it was okay to be scared and promising to get her out of there. Hesitating for only a moment, Min reached for his hand, her fingers tightening around his. In her mind, she quietly thought that Hao was the first person to ever treat her with such warmth. 10 minutes later, the other group, Yuan, Long, and Lin, finally emerged from the haunted house, all looking worse for wear. Lin cried out that she was never setting foot in a haunted house again, while Yuan scolded Long for screaming right in her ear. Long, still shaken, mumbled that he'd only been yelling because he was about to cry, which Lin confirmed by complaining that her brother embarrassed her in front of everyone. Just then, Hao and Min appeared at the exit. Hao, seeing Long's red face, asked if he was okay. Long, flustered, focused instead on asking if they were both all right. Yuan gave Hao a teasing look and commented on how long they'd been in there, hinting at something more. Hao lightly knocked her on the head and told her to stop imagining nonsense. Then Min, quiet and pale, stepped forward, and before anyone could react, she fainted right into Hao's arms.